Good morning. Welcome to the Kehillat Shari Torah Daily Halacha Review and Sefirah to Omer Counting for Thursday, April 29th. Today is the 32nd day of the Omer. Hayom Shnaim Ushloishim Yom Shehem Arba'a Shavuos V'Arba'a Yamim LaOmer. We are going through the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos's 48 methods for acquiring Torah, as guided through and explained by Rabbi Lanzer here. Day number 32 is Ohev es ha-toichachos. Tochacha is loosely translated as rebuke. He writes, and the requirement here is to love rebuke. And I'll just put in a little editorial note. I think most people love rebuke. They love rebuking others. But first of all, that's not the entirety of the point. And second of all, there's a deeper meaning to it. So let's see what he has to say. Tochacha, you have to love both giving tochacha, delivering the rebuke, and receiving it. Tochacha ensures that mistakes are rectified, and it's a crucial point for success in Torah. With regard to receiving tochacha, the nature of a person is to become defensive when criticized, and definitely not to enjoy it or love it. That's our nature. We can gain an insight on how to love tochacha from this story. Rabbi Levovitz once spoke in a certain town, and during the drasha, he rebuked the listeners. One by one, the people left until he was almost alone by himself talking in the shul. Afterwards, one of the students asked him why it was that the people of the town got so upset at this rebuke, while the students of the yeshiva, back in his yeshiva, got rebuked every week in the same way, and no one gets upset. So the rabbi explained to him in this way. He said, his person is made up of a physical body and a spiritual part, a neshama, the soul. The higher the level one is on, the more one defines himself by his neshama and not by the body. Someone on a rather low level defines himself entirely by their body and cannot differentiate between body and soul. When I rebuke the boys in yeshiva, he continued, I'm rebuking their physical bodies, which get in the way of their neshamas and hinder their growth. So the boys who define themselves by their souls, by their neshamas, are grateful to me, since I'm not rebuking their essence of their being, their neshamas at all. Rather, I'm showing them how to control their bodies, and they appreciate this. The people of the town, however, define themselves by their bodies, by the physical. So when I rebuked their physical being, they took it as a personal insult, and they got upset. Through enhancing the appreciation of our neshamas, we can come to love tochacha. With regard to giving tochacha, there are a couple important points to keep in mind. Always start with something warm, loving, and positive. Number one. Number two, include yourself in the rebuke. And number three, don't yell. The Chavetz Chaim was once talking about the importance of tochacha. One of the listeners approached him and said that he recently saw an inappropriate behavior in a certain shul, and he rebuked the congregants for it. But they got upset with him. Chavetz Chaim asked, how did you rebuke them? Could I ask? The person said, I got up on the bima, and with fire in my eyes, I yelled at them for their bad actions. Chavetz Chaim said to him, did you also yell when you put on tefillin this morning? Did you also scream when you washed your hands in Netilas Yadayim this morning? In the same way, you don't yell and you don't scream when doing other mitzvahs. We don't yell and scream when doing the mitzvah of tochacha either. Little tochacha to the rebuker himself. Okay, and the last point he makes is that the true meaning of tochacha is not to rebuke, it's rather to show, to demonstrate. Therefore, the real point of giving tochacha is not to tell off the other person, but to show them, to point out the correct way. An example of this is if you see someone being lax with the laws of davening, you could tell that person off and say, oh, you should really do this. Or you could approach that person and you say, I'm looking for someone to learn the laws of davening with. Would you learn the laws of the halachas of tefillah with me? Similarly, if you see someone struggling with keeping Shabbos, you could rebuke him and say, you really should do X, Y, and whatever. Or you could invite them over for a Shabbos meal and show them the beauty of it instead of simply rebuking them. Okay, good things to think about. Now, back to the laws of Birkat Kohanim, Nesias Kapayim, lifting up the palms, the priestly blessing. So the Chazan reads to the Kohanim the Birchas Kohanim from the Siddur, word for word, and they repeat each word after the Chazan until the conclusion of the first verse. At that point, the congregation says, Amen. In this manner, the Chazan says the second and third verses as well. We say, the rest of us say Amen at the end. After the second verse and after the third verse, the Kehillah says, Amen as well. The Chazan should not recite these verses from memory, but should read them from a siddur in order not to get confused. Very important to get the right words in the right order. the Chazan is allowed to answer Amen for these, and that's not considered an interruption because it's a necessary part of the prayer. When reciting the following words, the Kohanim turn a little bit towards the south, a little bit towards the north. Yivarechacha, Yishmerecha, and Eilecha. Yeah, a little bit towards the south, a little bit towards the north. Okay. Let's get this straight. When reciting the following words, the Kohanim turn a little bit towards the south, that's this way, and then towards the north. Yivarechacha and V'yishmerecha and Eilecha. May he bless you, may he safeguard you, and to you. V'yichuneka, Eilecha, and Lecha. May he be gracious to you, and so on. Because these words are in the second person, the Kohanim also turn towards the sides to bless the entire Kehillah. They also turn that way when saying the word Shalom, because it's the conclusion of the brachas. While the Kohanim prolong the slow chant before saying the concluding words of each verse, which are V'yishmerecha, V'yichuneka, and Shalom, the Kehillah recites the prayer that's printed in the Siddur, Ribbono Shel Olam, Master of the Universe. The one who's prompting the Kohanim, even if he's not the Chazan, should not say the Ribbono Shel Olam so he doesn't get mixed up. Certainly the Chazan should not recite it because it would be considered an interruption in the Shemona Esrei. The Kohanim should chant only the customary melody in order to avoid confusion. When the Kohanim say the words of the Birchas Kohanim, the congregants should not recite any verse, but should listen very attentively to the words pronounced by the Kohanim. For is there a servant, when receiving a blessing, would not listen carefully to it? It's a rhetorical question. It says Tractate Sota. But if the people in the Kehillah say verses, they can't concentrate on the bracha. Some are accustomed to say different verses, and they should be careful to say them only when the Chazan or Kohanim are chanting, when they're singing a nigun, but not when they're actually saying the words. Okay, we'll pause there. I will just remind everyone that tonight and tomorrow is Lag BaOmer, 33rd day of the Omer, Yortzeit of the Rashbi, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and in commemoration of that and the fact that the dying of Rabbi Akiva's Talmidim ceased on this day, on the 33rd day of the Omer, we observe that by omitting Tachanun from our prayers at Mincha today, and also tomorrow during the day. It's also a good day to get married. If you're not married, tomorrow's a good day to get married. If you need any help, please speak to me immediately. Have a wonderful day. Happy Lag BaOmer. Please join us again tomorrow.